This is a public service announcement for anyone going through a Saturn transit. My name's Laura Bruno and I'm an intuitive astrologer. I also have a whole bunch of Saturn transits going on right now, and it reminded me that Saturn transits are rough. So because I'm an astrologer, I figured out what was going on and how to deal with it. But it reminded me that many times when I hear from clients and they're just so depressed and they're being so judgmental of themselves and they can't see the light at the end of the tunnel, they're like, oh, why bother? It doesn't even matter. The glass is not only half empty, the glass is spilled and it broke. Those are usually Saturn transits that people have going on. And so I just thought I'd make a little video here, kind of casual. I'm going to end up sharing more personal information than I usually do just because it's not confidential. I can't really share client details, but everything that I'm sharing about myself is stuff that is just like textbook Saturn. So I currently have Pluto conjuncting my moon, and as an astrologer, I've been aware of this for like 5 years and really been prepping out the wazoo for that transit. I feel like I'm kind of going great with that one, but I got totally blindsided by Saturn. And I find that that actually happens a lot with people. So this actually ties very closely in with my YouTube channel. So I started my YouTube channel just a little over 2 months ago, and it was kind of on a whim. I just felt like one day, oh, I have to do this. I have things that I have to help people with. And so I did it, and it was going surprisingly well. Ironically, a video that I made about Saturn entering Pisces was just going totally gangbusters. But then on the day that Saturn actually entered Pisces, everything kind of screeched to a halt. Not totally to a halt, but that's how it felt. It felt like things were like boom, 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 boom. And then all of a sudden, somebody hit the brakes and like slammed on the brakes. And no matter what I did, I couldn't get that kind of traction with videos again. And it was harder. Initially, I was making videos in like one take. And it was like, 15 takes, and all of a sudden it was just so much work. And I tend to be someone who manifests things very easily. So for me, this was a complete shock until I realized, oh, right, when Saturn entered Pisces, it started conjuncting my descendant, opposing my ascendant, started squaring my midheaven, started squaring my sun, my Mercury, my Neptune. Oh, right, okay. So it just reminded me that when clients have these kinds of things, and oftentimes it's not quite so many Saturn transits all at once, but when clients have that kind of a Saturn restriction, it often feels like a betrayal from the universe. It's like things were going so well, and then all of a sudden somebody comes in and like totally rains on your parade. And if you're not an astrologer and you haven't had a reading, you don't know what's going on. But oftentimes it's Saturn just kind of saying, hey, your big dreams or your big plans, they're not quite on solid ground. You've got to improve your foundation. And so Saturn gets a bad rap because Saturn is the realist. And if you've got, pie in the sky dreams, or like you're building your amazing castle, Saturn comes along and is like, there's a crack in that foundation. You can't build any higher. It's going to topple. And if you can step back and realize that this is actually something meant to support you in the long run by having a strong foundation, it's a lot easier to take that message. So I want to cover a few of the things that are most common in Saturn transits, the negatives, but stay till the end because I also share the things that are the positives of Saturn and also how best to deal with them. And that's based on my own experience as well as many, many clients that I've helped through these kinds of transits. So I'm not going to go through every single thing, but the general experience that people have with Saturn is it feels kind of like a downer. It feels depressing. It feels like you don't have as much energy. You don't have the kind of stamina that you used to have. Your tolerance goes like way down. You get really judgmental, especially of yourself. It can come out against others too. It kind of depends. I notice that when people have a Saturn Mercury transit, especially if it's like an opposition or a square, that's when the internal voice that's like, you suck, that voice comes out much stronger. I also notice that when people have Saturn Sun transits, even if it's like a conjunction or even sometimes a trine, but especially if it's an opposition or a square, one of the more difficult aspects, it's like somebody, you had your bright light, your sun, and like somebody like hid it under a bushel and like toppled it on the floor and kicked it and made you feel like, who are you to shine your light out there in the world? I hear that a lot from people. And when I get on the phone with someone and they're just being so negative, I have to check their transits. I'm like, there's got to be some kind of Saturn influence here. And usually it'll be Saturn is opposing their Mercury or sometimes opposing their Venus. So like that love energy just... Also, when you've got a Saturn square Venus situation going on, there's oftentimes a lot of breakups, or at least the relationship needs to undergo some kind of a change. With my Saturn square Neptune transit that I have going on right now, I had this very unusual experience for me of like really doubting myself and like really doubting my faith. I'm the kind of person where I kind of live very magically and lots of things just open up. It's pretty easy to manifest things, and it's really easy for me to be a glasses half full kind of person. But for a couple of days there, I was like, what is going on? Like I was just having these like big picture doubts of all kinds of things that like I know in my core, but all of a sudden, like that Saturn energy was kind of like, well, can you prove it? Or how do you know that's true? Well, maybe it's not true. And if that's not true, then who are you? So it can be really like a downer for me because I'm an astrologer and I was like, I got to see what's going on with my transits. I figured that out pretty quickly, but I've talked with people where it's been like a dark night of the soul for months if they don't realize what's happening. So Saturn conjunct Moon can also be really rough. I know when I turned 20, I had like an existential crisis, and I couldn't really figure out why, because I never really cared about age. I don't really look my age, but when I turned 20, it was like, oh my God, I'm having a meltdown. What's going on? And I didn't realize until the next time that Saturn conjuncted my moon, which was when we had the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction in 2020. That was like right on my moon. Then I was like, oh man, this is rough. And so I thought, I'll look at the last time that Saturn conjuncted my moon, and maybe that will give me some insights. And sure enough, it was right around the time that I turned 20. And I thought, that explains it, because I've never cared about my age. But for some reason, turning 20, all of a sudden I was just totally aware of the ticking clock. And Saturn is the time master. Saturn's also the lord of karma. So any kind of old relationships or old issues that you've had that are unresolved, Saturn kind of like gets out his clipboard and is like, yeah, you got to deal with this. And that doesn't always feel good. In retrospect, both of my Saturn conjunct Moon transits were just amazingly helpful and really grounded and stabilized me and made me become much more careful about protecting my emotions and taking care of myself, nurturing myself. But that was easier to do the second time around when I realized what was happening. The first time, big blindside. So those are some of the negatives that I notice with Saturn. Some of the positives that happen with Saturn, and of course, I haven't even mentioned the dreaded Saturn return, which I think gets a terribly bad rap, and not always, it's not always warranted. I mean, a lot of people actually get married during their Saturn return. There are a lot of breakups, that's true, but oftentimes because Saturn is the planet of commitment, it can also take a relationship to the next level. A lot of times people will have their first child at their Saturn return. I do find that those relationships, when I look at family dynamics, that the child that has the same Saturn as one of the parents, like there's usually some kind of tension there, because it's kind of like your presence as the child is like a constant Saturn return transit for the parent. And those are usually extremely karmic relationships. They tend to really affect both parties, and they can be difficult, as Saturn, as I said, Great Malefic. But they also tend to be the relationships that have the strongest bonds. So even if the people don't really get along with each other, like on some level, there's some major connection there. I know I had that with my dad, and we had a very tricky relationship. My dad was definitely like the control in my life, like the authoritarian, the person that like, I have a big dream and my dad's like, no. And that's taken me a while to make peace with. But at the same time, everybody else in my family was always jealous of my dad's and my relationship, because there was just this bond there. And so that was a big part of that bond. So a few good things about Saturn: one, the commitment; two, there is like this karmic tie, this sense of just like utter devotion to each other, even if you don't like each other. Like there's this sense of responsibility and this sense of connection. That can be in family relationships, that can be in personal relationships. In my marriage, my second husband's Saturn is actually right on my descendant. It's like minutes away from my descendant. And so Saturn is right there right now. He's having to do a whole bunch of cleanup things for his dad and kind of like end of life things for his father. That's pretty common with your second Saturn return. But it does give you that drive to complete the tasks that you came here to do. So if you feel that responsibility, and normally you might just like shirk it off or feel like, oh, I just can't do this, with Saturn, it's like you're devoted enough to make it happen. And in a relationship, a strong Saturn connection is like total glue to the relationship. So, I mean, that can be good or bad depending on the other aspects with the relationship. But for me, it's been a very grounding, stabilizing influence, and I've very much appreciated it. It's also been something that's helped to support me in creating a firmer foundation. I used to move around all the time. Like I've moved 43 times in my life. And since I met my husband, I've only moved, I think, 3 times. So really slowed down quite a bit. That's a Saturn influence. Some other good things that can come from Saturn is, you'll have to work harder to get your goals accomplished, and they will probably take longer than you would like. But the good news with Saturn is that once those goals are in progress, they're really likely to stick. You're likely to have that stamina. Even though you'll have less energy, you'll have that determination, that stamina in order to get things done, especially if they're like the kind of annoying, unpleasant tasks that you don't really feel like doing. So the Saturn transits will eventually pass, but what I find with people is in the beginning, it's a bit of a shocker. It feels like a real downer. But if you put in the work, if you do the inner work, if you actually kind of put on your analytical cap and take a look at what's working and what's not working, and really have the courage to kind of ruthlessly assess why, then you can actually make tremendous gains, tremendous progress during that time. It is a bit of a restriction, but I like to think of it kind of like, the parent that gives you rules. They give you rules because they love you. When you're a kid, you might not like that, right? Like everybody wants to stay out late and do whatever they want. They don't want the strict parent. But when you have the parent that says, no, this is how you manage your money, and this is what time you need to go to bed, and it's important, you need to get good grades, like that does actually carry through, and usually, if you don't internalize the criticism too much, it improves your life. And so the trick with dealing with Saturn transits, Number one is just to remember that they're temporary. Depending on retrogrades, they usually last about a year. You get a couple little breaks in there. If you're really lucky, Saturn might just like fly by one of those points for you, but usually it's about a year. And the beginning of any difficult transit is always the most difficult. That's important to know. Once you kind of get the hang of it, then you can take the flavor of that transit and you can choose where you apply it. So in my life right now, I've taken my yoga practice to another level. And for me, I'm kind of like, okay, Saturn, like I'm doing it. Saturn squaring my Neptune, like I'm bringing my spirit into my body here, and that's helped a lot. And what I'm finding is I'm stronger, and there's asanas that I couldn't do that I now can. And so it's like, it's already paying off, and it's only been a month really that I've been dealing with this. So it can be helpful, and I have noticed that with clients as well. Like once you just accept, okay, things are going to take a little longer, they're going to be a little slower, it's, I'm not necessarily going to get those instantaneous rewards. Get a checklist and give yourself your own rewards, right? Like check mark, check mark, check mark. That can feel very satisfying. Saturn likes the check mark. Saturn rules Capricorn. Your ambitions, it's a good time to actually really be true with yourself of, hey, I want to do better, or hey, I have ambitions. I know for me, like I'm not really that ambitious of a person. I've got Mars in Pisces. It's like, but I do have a Capricorn North Node, and I've got a packed 10th house. So like Saturn is present in my life, whether I like it or not. And what I found just in this little time of like curtailing me is that it made me actually want things that I before was like, I don't care about that. I don't need that. So you can work this for yourself. You can make a list of goals. It's a great time to be very analytical. It's a great time to pursue dreams, but just to remember that it's probably going to take longer. You're going to do better at kind of creating a strategy than you are to just like run right out of the gate. If you run right out of the gate, you're probably going to like trip over a hurdle or something. That's just the way of Saturn. He's like, not so fast. If you can deal with that, then it's kind of like when fishermen can't go out to sea, they go home and repair their nets. That's a Saturn transit. Go repair your nets. You will eventually catch way more fish, or whatever it is that you're wanting to catch. You'll be able to catch more of that because of the Saturn transit. And if it's affecting your moon, you're going to be much more emotionally stable after that Saturn transit. You will benefit from it. If it's Saturn, affecting your sun, your light will return, but you might have to work a little harder. You might have to do some positive affirmations. You might have to look at your shortcomings and actually come to terms with them and just accept yourself for who you are. So I hope this video helps some people. It definitely was a shocker to me, and it shouldn't have been. I'm an astrologer. I've been like stalking Pluto coming up on my moon because it electrifies a whole bunch of my chart. But because I was prepared for that, I'm doing actually really well with that. But with Saturn, it usually does kind of feel like a blindside, and it feels kind of mean. And if you take it personally, it's really easy to get depressed and sad and really down about yourself, but you don't have to do that. It's not meant to, crap all over your dreams. It's actually meant to help you achieve them in a better, more sustainable, solid, good foundation way. So hopefully that helps, and I wish you all the very, very best. If you need support through a Saturn transit, I do offer private readings, and I'm linking my Saturn entering Pisces video below. All right, till next time, bye.